Hello and welcome back to Birth the Middle Way. My name is Emma Cardinal. This is my beautiful sister, Sammy Love, and today we're going to be talking about this concept of imprinting. And before we get into that, Sam, would you like to share the definition so we can all have a foundation of what this concept is?
Today's conversation, we're really excited to dive into this topic. So I'm gonna go over actually a few definitions of imprinting just to give kind of a broader definition and idea. So I'm gonna go over three different categories of how imprinting works. One in biological, physiological situations with animals, and so this refers to the critical period shortly after birth or hatching, during which an animal forms strong attachments, usually to a parent or caregiver. And the example given here is really beautiful. It's with birds, ducks, or geese. Hatchlings will typically follow the first moving object that they see. So that's oftentimes their mother, but not always. And sometimes, if that were to be a human, we can't remember the name of this movie. We were talking about it before we hit record, but I don't know if you guys remember back in the early 90s, there was a movie about a young boy and he ended up having a flock of geese follow him around. And he like teaches them to fly. He builds this like flying like airplane. I can see the movie perfectly in my mind. I can't remember the name, but drop it in the comments if you remember it. But so that's an awesome example of imprinting in animals, right? And so it's just like that biological instinctive orientation, specifically in these birds that we're using as an example, to follow the first moving object, right? And so they're imprinted upon by that moving object, and they create thus an attachment. So in human psychology, imprinting refers to many ways in early life experiences, especially with caregivers or parents, where experiences leave a deep and lasting effect on the emotional, relational, and cognitive development of a human being. So this is where early patterns can influence attachment styles. So attachment styles, for those who don't know, are secure attachment, avoidant attachment, anxious attachment, and anxious avoidant attachment. And we can speak into those a little bit more as well as the conversation goes on, as well as the development of belief systems and behavioral tendencies throughout life. And I will actually add to this definition very much so imprinting is related to the process of developing a sense of self or a sense of self-worth. So the example given here for humans is a baby who experiences consistent comfort and security may imprint a sense of trust and safety in the world. So continuously experiencing in the wake of the type of care received, the world is safe. That is the imprint. That is the belief system that is imprinted upon the consciousness.
Right.
And
And
then
this can
genetic
be
and go ahead.
I was just going to say this can be um, positive or negative. This can be, traumatic and imprints that are very
Right.
difficult to
Right.
carry forward throughout life, but they can also be really supportive.
Right. And so the opposite of this example, right? So the infant that experiences comfort and security, right? So the infant that doesn't, the infant that is maybe left alone to cry it out excessively, or I mean, even greater forms of neglect, is going to likely imprint that the world is not safe and that you can't just trust everyone. You can't trust adults. You can't trust the world, these types of things, right? So then the genetic and epigenetic imprinting, in genetics, genomic imprinting is a biological process where certain genes are expressed in a parent of origin specific manner. This means some genes are active only if inherited from the mother, while others only if inherited from the father. It involves epigenetic markers such as DNA methylation. I don't know what that means. And that silence one copy of a gene. And so to summarize, imprinting is referring to the process where an early experience or influence creates a lasting impact on behavior, emotional patterns, or gene expression. The context determines whether it's about animal behavior, human psychological development, or molecular biology. And so, the gene one is a little bit kind of the way the definition was worded, I would say it could be confusing. So to just speak into that a little bit more, speaking specifically into epigenetics, that piece would, to my understanding, it is speaking about how our world can turn on and off specific genes. That's the world of epigenetics in general. And then with the genetics, it's speaking about how the DNA will select certain genetic markers depending on whether it came from the mother or the father. So, yeah. So, we're specifically in this conversation, obviously, probably going to be focusing most on the human psychology piece as it relates to birth and parenting in the early years. And, even actually exploring as far as imprinting in pregnancy. And I would love to navigate a little bit of a discussion around the imprinting of conception, because that is a little bit more of a nuanced topic.
Ooh. Ooh, so good.
Let's do it.
Yeah, amazing. I mean, would you like
So,
to
yeah, I
start?
mean, it's definitely a topic for me that I'm quite passionate about, in terms of it's something that's in the back of my mind a lot in general. Not only when it comes to my own births or supporting other women in the planning and preparation for their birth, but actually just in parenting in general. I think it's a really, really relevant conversation and just kind of topic to have in the back of your mind of what are the subtleties that I am communicating to this being that I'm caregiving for, that I'm parenting, in my actions, my responses, my lack of actions, my lack of responses, etc. And I feel like for me, it's really such a beautiful layer to have in my awareness, because again, I feel like it's rooted in the belief that the opposite, right? We can lean into the idea that we're precognition not so much matters. Oh, babies aren't going to remember it anyway. Oh, it doesn't matter, right? Oh, they're not going to remember their birth. They're not going to have birth trauma because they can't remember it. They're not going to remember that time that I yelled at them and got super aggressive because they're 1.5. No, that's not the way it works, right? And it's really this expansive teaching on the workings of human psychology. It's understanding actually how deeply conscious we are from the moment of conception, not from birth. Literally, we have ancient traditions such as Ayurveda and Chinese medicine that speak deeply into the significance of conception, right? And the imprinting that happens there. Is the baby conceived in a loving relationship? I have a friend, my best friend, literally says she's gone deep into her spiritual path as well in yoga and Ayurveda, and has done lots of meditation, and in that process of feeling into herself, she's convinced that her father was drunk when she was conceived. It's like she can feel that energy
Mhm.
in her. And so it's like this concept, this idea that the energetics of the way in which we were conceived matters. The energetics of the way we were gestated matters. The
Mhm.
energetics of the way we were birthed matters. The energetics of the way we're parented matters. And so if it matters and is significant, how does that knowing impact the way that we move through these experiences as mothers, and with our partners? What intentionality do we put behind the subtleties of the decision making,
Mhm.
right? And this is the very, very reason that I spoke in our last episode around my process in pregnancy, birth, postpartum, etc. That for me, it was more than just about life. I was very, very focused on these subtleties of imprinting, and they mattered to me, and I wanted to pursue activating the healthiest imprinting for my children. And so that belief really drove my decision making process, and I think it does for many families, right? So I'm curious what comes up for you on the topic of of imprinting,
I
where
mean,
we're
so
gonna
much.
flow.
Like as you're talking, I'm just going through my own process as I'm like, stay present, listen to what she's saying, receive what she's saying, and still my mind is like, oh my God, this is what I used to think. This was, influencing my decisions, even birthing, wanting to birth at home, wanting to have a free birth, wanting to be unobserved, having a golden halo for 3 hours, um, really wanting, really wanting to do all of those things and having a clear vision in my mind of how I was going to mother my child. Of course, with flexibility of, you're going to be tired and you're going to be impatient and you're going to feel different things and you're not going to be perfect, but that was such a motivating factor in my own birth choices, um, and my journey with pregnancy, and yeah, I'm just, I can feel the cogs in my mind just going, and I'm having kind of a hard time even formulating words to articulate what is coming up for me, because the woman that made the decision to free birth is not the woman that is sitting here in this conversation right now. The woman that made the decision to birth on her own, because as you shared within your own birthing process, it wasn't just about safety. It was about the quality of life that you were giving to your children, right? And knowing that the way that we birth, the immediacy of postpartum and how we parent in the the earlier years of infancy can really impact how our children experience the world, show up in the world, relate to other people. And I wanted only the best for my child. And I was, yeah, really set on that. Not thinking that we can also give our children those things, even if our birth isn't what we envision, even if we don't birth at home, even if we end up having a cesarean, even if our child is in an incubator for a certain period of time, and we don't get that golden halo, or our child doesn't get to, be in our arms for a little bit, we can still show up to instill healthy attachment and and yeah, I mean, I'm not sure if I'm super cohesive right now because as you're talking, I'm like processing and just talking. So, I'm just like, oh my God, this and this and this and this. And yeah, yeah.
Well, yeah, so I want to just define the golden halo that you're speaking to, or the golden hour
Mhm,
as it's also spoken to, and that's the 3 hour period that comes after birth, and it's a really important imprinting moment. And this has been actually studied, and um yeah, and so it is this window of time where the best option, the ideal, let's use the word ideal. The ideal
mhm,
option is to have baby on mom, constant skin to skin, with as little to no interference as possible. And ideally, this is a period of time in which the baby is being supported to navigate finding boob and, exploring that first latch. And, mom is having all of these beautiful rushes of oxytocin come through, and it's supporting those very, very, very crucial moments of first bonding and first attachment. And so certain practices that are normalized in the realm of protocol in the hospital from this teaching and perspective innately become against the imprinting process. And so what we know is in the hospital, typically babies are taken away from mom right away, and they are cleaned, they are measured, they are weighed, and oftentimes they are given things like antibiotics in the eyes, a vitamin K shot, etc. And it's not that these things don't have a time and place and that families can't orient towards choosing those things, right? But why are we normalizing the interference of this time to measure a baby?
as protocol,
as
as
protocol,
this
as
is a given,
standard
this is
of
going to
care,
happen. Yeah, yeah, exactly.
right?
Instead of
Right. And so this is
approaching a birth as what is presenting in this moment. Does baby need extra
right,
care right now? Does baby need resuscitation? Is mom is she hemorrhaging? Like, are there circumstances in which, we need to interfere? Because those do exist
right,
also. And it would
right,
be foolish
right.
and false
And
to say that they don't.
right. And the reality is that there are hospitals that I'm aware of in Europe that are attempting to navigate those situations that you just named with as little interference as possible. And so we're seeing in some hospitals that they're starting to do neonatal resuscitation on mom with
Mm,
placenta intact. Okay, and there is wisdom and there is factual information that would make that process the ideal way,
mhm,
because if you do it on mom and placenta is still inside mom, whether this is via C-section or vaginal birth, what we know is that a substantial amount of blood is left in the placenta after birth. That there is a 3 to 5 minute window in which the cord will pulsate and the placenta after birth will pass all of this oxygenated, rich blood with all of the stem cells, all of the nutrients, all the minerals that we find in blood to support the baby in that process of coming to life, right? Imagine if a baby isn't breathing, what is better for them to receive than oxygenated blood?
which
What
is
is
the
going
way
to
that they've
elongate
been
that
breathing,
window their whole
this
life
whole
up to
time,
that point?
because
Right,
they're going from an aquatic state to an earthbound state, right? To being,
exactly.
yeah, they're kind of in this in between, like, amphibious kind of space where they're not
Right,
water beings yet, they're
right. They're
not
they're
fully
going from
land
water
beings.
beings. Yeah,
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 you
totally.
know?
Yeah, it's this very liminal, transitional, delicate space for sure, right?
Mhm.
And so, yeah, like, it's like that's where, I feel like a lot of our conversations are really oriented towards is like, can we speak more into the possibility of change, right? Like, this practice is already being done in hospitals. And so there is clear evidence and research around the benefit around the results, like why are hospitals across America and Canada not looking towards these hospitals that are doing these more progressive things and enacting these protocols instead? And so I guess that's the prayer, right? That's the hope, is that, through talking about it more, through bringing these ideas into, more people's awareness, thus bringing it into more conversation, how can we create a ripple effect that can hopefully create change in all birth settings that are beneficial to women and families? And that doesn't mean, right? Again, we can speak into the reality of nuance, and that even if the protocol shifts towards, okay, let's orient towards keeping placenta and cord intact and resuscitate on mom, that doesn't mean that will be possible 100% of the time. In severe emergencies, like, or in specific situations, depending on moving variables that we're not even able to account for in this moment, they might have to sever cord and remove baby from mom. And then that, I think, brings us into our next layer, which is um really wanting to speak into the yes and piece here, right?
Mm,
Yes, there is an ideal, and what happens when the ideal isn't what is activated? How can we show up to support those moms, those families, those babies in a healing process that, again, lands in exactly what you said, the outcome of a secure attachment, or a healthy sense of self, a sense of safety in the world, that lands in the same result that the original imprinting can elicit. And I want to make a really crucial point. It's not about replacing the imprinting. with these situations, either those imprints happen or they don't. And that can be a really challenging thing, a confronting thing for moms who are aware of this and pursue that path, trying to activate those things. And then something happens that those things aren't activated, that can elicit a deeper process of grief and integration. And the reason I want to speak into this yes and is specifically to speak to those moms who have had that experience and just remind you, your child is not broken. You are not broken. This isn't wrong or bad. There's a unique path that you and your baby were meant to walk, and you can absolutely still activate deep, beautiful, profound healing that will support you in supporting your child to become a whole, healthy, self-loving human being. I don't at all want to
Right.
perpetuate the idea for listeners that if
Mhm.
the imprinting doesn't happen, that it's hopeless, your child's broken or something, like the extremes of
Yeah.
these rhetorics. And I just want to be really mindful of how these teachings can be digested and say that there's always different pathways to health and wholeness.
Right. And I think perhaps what you might be sharing, or maybe the way that I'm going to describe it, is it's not about, yeah, like you said, erasing old imprints. It's about being in relationship with the imprints that are present. How can we engage with them? How can we just show up to them? If there is an imprint where, let's say, your baby was taken away and put in an incubator for a period of time, you can't go back and change that. And maybe that saved your baby's life. And thank you for existing. Thank you for that. And how do we show up to maybe a baby that is now experiencing some avoidant attachment or some fear of connection or some feeling like intimacy and connection isn't safe? How do we show up in parenting moving forward in that way? And so, at least from my lens, and I don't want to speak for you, but we're not here to shame anyone. We're not here to blame anyone. We're here to discuss, and discuss from a realistic perspective, not an idealistic perspective, because we do see, at least I've seen so much content, whether it's on social media or in various books, and we talk about ideals as though if we follow this path, that's what's going to unfold. And if you don't, yeah, like what Sam
Right.
said, your child is fucked. And that's just not
Not the
true.
case.
We're all, yeah, we're all dealt a hand. We're all born in our own ways, but just because you're born via cesarean or your baby is, doesn't inherently mean that your baby is messed up for life, or that you failed,
Right.
or that your baby is
Right.
like, all it means is that you are now getting to engage with a set of circumstances and your child like everyone else, because birth is unique to every
Exactly.
single scenario and every single woman. And how the question now is, how do we want to engage with
Right.
what we're being
Exactly.
presented with, right? And that's really what
Right.
responsibility is. How do we respond to these
Right.
situations?
Right. And that brings up a thread that again actually connects back to our last episode. And so those who haven't listened, maybe
Go
maybe go
listen.
back and listen, because we're kind of weaving here. But so last episode I was speaking into, actually it was a conversation around imprinting without us actually using that word, when I was talking about the birth psychologist that inspired me, all of these things and the connection she was making. And I had a third point actually that I never got to in that episode that was inspiring for me in terms of the teachings that this woman shared that led me to want to pursue my path as a birth worker. And the third point she was speaking to was actually a point on imprinting and imprinting in birth. Specifically, she had shared, so they had conducted different research around different birth outcomes and exploring the psychology and the patterns of the psychology of adults depending on their birth experience. And so what they found was a heavy correlation for C-section babies. And look, this isn't an extreme thing, right? And so the reason I actually highlight this is because, like, also we can see that, like, not all imprinting is like oh, either it's like this golden nugget or this crisis, right? There are many actually imprints that are in between these extremes. And so the imprint that was found here was that there was a higher percentage chance that individuals born of C-section would elicit the psychological behavior of procrastination. And so what they would see is that they had this psychological behavior of stall, 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 procrastinate, procrastinate, push that off, and then do something really quickly. And if
Okay,
you
so this makes me,
think
I'm
about the
curious.
imprint,
So I'm curious,
let me
is
finish the
this
connection.
study, okay, okay, I'll hold the thought. I'm
Let me
holding it.
finish the connection, the weaving, because the theme there, the imprint there, the association being made is that energetic is present for many C-section births. There's oftentimes something that stalls the labor process. And for whatever reason, the baby is not able to move through the birth canal, right? There's this stall. In fact, that word is sometimes used, right? And then if the baby is then thus born through cesarean section, that process of birth happens extremely quickly. We cut open the uterus, baby is pulled out, birth is done, right? And so stall, 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 do something quickly.
Okay, so here's my question.
Is
No,
the
because
question
I'm
still
like,
relevant? Yeah.
it is. No, it's completely relevant. So is this study done with emergency cesareans where mom enters the birth portal and she's in labor, or is this done with planned cesareans where mom is not in labor?
So I don't have, I should try to find the study. I don't have it this. I mean, I was in this university studying in what, 2014, I think, 2014 even. So it's been a hot minute. To my understanding, to my remembrance, she was just naming C-section.
Okay.
So,
Because I do feel like that would be different.
It's relevant, right? Because if the
Yeah.
mom has labored, I think that's the only way that you would get the stall. If a mom has a planned cesarean section and hasn't gone into physiological labor, there's not going to be that stall piece. It's just going to be birth.
Yeah. 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 And it's just going to be like, for me, I would say like jumping, like doing something without a forethought because you're not going into labor. You're not receiving those
Right.
hormones that are present in the
Exactly.
laboring process. You're just being
Impulsivity.
removed. Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Impulsivity. Exactly. Right. And
Interesting.
so I
And that's
would
making
assume,
me
like,
no, this is just
what
making
is it
me think
making
of
you do?
my own birth. It's making me think of my own birth because I
Right.
was born, my mom was in labor for like 5 hours. I was born really quick, but she had her waters broken. And they didn't just break on their own. I wasn't born on call, which could have been a potential. And so I'm just wondering, like, there was still outside influence that came in. And while it wasn't actively like I wasn't hurt by it, there was no cutting involved, but there was that, you know, active engagement of we're going to break her waters to move this along faster. Like,
Right.
did that influence?
Right.
I'm just reflecting on different things
Can
here.
you make any associations or in your personality that would you kind of have to sit with it, right? To go into like the
Yeah,
energetics of that, like what is
yeah. Well,
right.
I mean, and
So actually
I've sat
I'm
with
gonna
that too.
right. Well, I'm gonna plug
Yeah.
for listeners right now. So I really, really recommend an exercise, and this was actually given to me from this birth psychologist. I need to figure out her name because I speak about her. I can't remember her name. That would be a hunt. But anyway, this
If we can
lovely
find it,
woman who influenced my
we'll put
life
it in
and
the
said,
description.
right, right. I know that's a hunt. I don't know even how I would go about finding that. Um, but this lovely woman who had a massive impact on my life, where presented this idea, this teaching, this exercise of going back and writing out your birth story. And so, first of all, talk to your mom. If your mom is still with us, sit down at her feet and ask her to tell you your birth story. And in my experience, if your dad is still with us, I recommend bringing him to the conversation because I've found that moms struggle to remember when it's like 30
Totally.
years out. They're like, I have no idea. Don't know what that is. Some interesting
Hmm.
cognitive dissonance there, but yeah. So get as much information about your birth told to you. Anybody who is
Mm-hmm.
in your birth that you have access to that can give you a perspective or a perception of different moving variables and things that happened. And once you've heard the story in as much detail as possible, sit down and write it from your perspective. And do it slowly and do it really with intentionality and awareness. Be present in your body. Feel what comes up. Feel the emotions as you write it out. And really meet yourself there, because it's a very profound practice that can elicit some really beautiful healing. And this practice is, I just want to also say, it's more relevant for women who are preparing to birth. There is a very unique thread of medicine that can be found in integrating your own birth as you prepare to birth. Because
And so, okay,
again, the
are we
imprinting, right?
writing this?
We want to
Yeah,
explore
are
our
we? Sorry, go,
from your
continue.
perspective as the baby as much as possible. So my mom went into labor, she was feeling this, I was feeling, you know. So for me, for example, I was born with forceps. And when I did this exercise when I was in university, I had a really large amount of anger come up as I was writing specifically about that piece of the forceps. Because as I heard the story, like this was before I did any education on birth, okay? This is before I ever studied to become a doula. This is before I ever had really any big grandiose ideas of what was right or wrong or good or bad around birth, right? And so I was just me, just a woman writing about my birth, and I felt anger, like an almost like irrational amount of anger around that piece around forceps, you know. And as I've integrated more with my education and spoken to my mom more, I've come to understand the why behind that anger with a little bit more clarity, you know. I was in the birth canal, and you know, I think me and my mom could have done it ourselves. I don't, there was nothing that was, obviously I haven't talked to the doctor that was holding space, but this was 1991, and you know, it just, yeah, it was what it was. And there was nothing that happened in the story at all. Everything seemed completely normal, physiological. You know, my mom had it, you know, it seemed like everything was normal. There might have been a little like stall there, or, you know, but there was nothing that I have heard still to this day that leads me to believe that like I would not have been born without the use of forceps. And so also, you know, I've struggled with neck pain on and off my whole life, like in some chapters quite severe. And, you know, like when I had heard this story in more detail, it was after a chunk of time that I had been seeing chiropractors regularly, massage, like having this like severe pain in my neck. And like again, the anger came up. It's like my very first experience of the world was having my neck yanked on. Like, you know, was that life-saving care? Was that necessary? You know, what my sense, my intuition in my bones is it was not necessary. And so like, you know, even talking about it now, I can feel like a certain layer of agitation, you know, come up of like, why can't we just leave birth undisturbed? Like, why can't we really wait until that's so relevant, till there's an emergency at hand to intervene? Like, why is it every little stall in birth, you know? Okay, let's intervene, every little thing, you know? It's like people just struggle to keep their hands off, you know? They want to I don't know, this is coming from my trigger, but I'm like, they want to be the hero, you know? They want to save the day, and it's like you're causing harm.
Mm-hmm.
And that's mostly, I just want to say, speaking into this experience and like feeling the emotion come up. It's not like I
Mm-hmm.
believe again that like all intervention is bad and that there's not a place for that. It's just, so yeah, just to speak into that experience, you know, and invite listeners to do the same, because you gain also more understanding for yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like to have that understanding of like, oh, of course I'm going to have an orientation towards next stuff when that was my first experience in life. Of course I'm going to be protective over undisturbed birth because that was my first experience in life. You know, like if the truth of like my first imprint is like you're disturbing me and like interfering and it's causing harm, now I've come full circle as an adult and I'm like, how can we disturb as least as possible? That doesn't mean eradicate the medical system, but how can we step back and
And
give birth a little bit more space to unfold?
I think that nuance of how can we disturb birth as little as possible, because sometimes disturbances are necessary and helpful. Sometimes forceps really do support a birthing process. And then my question is, when is it necessary? When is it important? And how can we ever know for certain? And I don't have these answers. These are just, I have many, many questions, right?
Right. How can we ever know for certain is like, I think that's in many ways, in many situations, there is a lack of certainty, and sometimes there is a clear certainty, right? And so, like, in that situation, if we were getting to the point of considering the use of forceps, it would very much so be about monitoring the baby's heart rate, looking for significant decels, right? Significant being the key word there, because decels can be a normal part of physiological birth. However, some decels are not. And how that's determined is,
and what are decels?
The level of decel over. So decels is the decrease in the heart rate. So the heart rate is slowing and potentially to a dangerous rate. And so the way that we determine that is through the level of deceleration over a specific period of time, right? There's two variables that we're really looking at there. And so that would be one of the main things. We could be looking for things like meconium in the waters, if the water had broke, any signs of distress for the infant. Really watching a few contractions and observing the mother in her process of pushing, right? And like what we could be watching there is like, is there any movement? Is the baby's head, usually you can see, like as a baby's moving through the vaginal canal, usually you can the vagina opens and you can see into the yoni a bit and see the head. And oftentimes what we're looking for is that there's some motion, right? So like you want to see like while the woman's pushing, see some level of the baby's head moving out. And then when she relaxes, it's normal for the baby to kind of come back in a little bit. And we want to see progress as the baby's is journeying out. If we're not seeing that, it doesn't necessarily mean that, okay, now we need forceps. Can we change the mom's position? Can we somehow empower the mom to be feeling what's happening in her body? Right? So there's other options that can still honor the physiological process before just jumping to forceps. And you're absolutely right. Sometimes forceps are going to be the next best tool, because sometimes babies do actually get stuck. And that's real and true. We cannot be perpetuating a rhetoric that like, oh, you just have to move, you just have to follow your intuition, and then your baby's going to be born. Well, that's also not the full picture.
And what I'm hearing from you is this invitation, I guess, to medical providers, to moms, to whoever might be in that driver's seat. Hopefully it is mom, but if mom is inviting other people into her birth space and baby's not coming, as this example, what are some things that we can do first before resorting to cesarean or forceps or the vacuum or any other more forceful techniques to extract the baby out? What can we do first? And I like to even approach my health in general in that way. Like if I'm feeling sick, okay, well, what can I do first? I can eat garlic. I can take echinacea. I can take this. Like there's different things, homeopathic remedies, herbal remedies, essential oils.
Right.
But then when they're not working and something is getting, being prolonged or getting in the realms of like, maybe this is a bit of a dangerous duration of a fever, what are we going to do after that? Because thank goodness the medical system exists. Thank goodness, we have Tylenol or whatever it is if needed. But when is it needed? And what can we do preliminary that could also help and cause less harm in the process?
Right. And that's such a good question and point. And, like it really brings me into this consideration around things like antibiotics, and that's like the parallel for me that it brings up is like, I've used antibiotics for my older daughter once. And it was in a moment in time. It was 3 days after I had given birth to Sage. I was in bed. I was dealing with, some intensity around some postpartum healing and just super open, really not in a grounded earthly plane to be able to navigate the situation that was happening with Sunny. And Sunny had come down with both a bacterial and something
Viral?
parasitic infection. No, not viral, parasitic. And she was pooping blood. She had blood in her stool. And she was 13 months old. She was an infant basically. And it was intense and it was scary, and in that moment not having the capacity to, and also it be having some level of urgency, you need her to stop pooping blood ASAP. And so yeah, I made the choice then to give her a round of antibiotics, and it did what it needed to, and it also did absolutely impact her microbiome. And I can quite tangibly see the difference in my daughter's systems in terms of like when they get sick. Sunny will now get sick with more severity consistently. And so, like I can see that there has been impact from the antibiotics. And of course, I've been, focusing on everything to support her system and healing from that. And what was my other option in that moment? I don't feel ashamed for the choice that I made because it was relevant given the moving variables of that moment, and it was potentially life-saving care, or like it prevented a much more extreme situation. And so again, like that's where it comes down to decision making and really assessing the different variables in a situation in terms of, what choices are going to be made. And so,
And I think
your
that
question.
example, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Okay. I was just going to say that I think that example is so beautifully, it illustrates this idea of how do we relate to the circumstances that we either contribute to, that
Exactly.
happen. And so this is where you can have let's say you have a cesarean. You can still choose to have, hopefully that your providers are supporting this, but you could still have skin to skin. You can still ask and request this golden halo for the 3 hours and say, hey,
Right.
yeah, maybe you need to weigh the baby.
Right.
Maybe you need to make sure if this was a life-saving like or emergency cesarean,
Right.
maybe you do all those checks, but then what do you do following that?
Right.
What other things, what like
Right.
energetic protocols that you're requesting can you ask for where you have baby on you after the surgery and you're
Right.
still saying, hey, can everybody just
Right.
leave us alone once we're in the clear and mom, dad, and baby can just be quiet together, light dimmed. And then you're still engaging with a secure attachment. And you're also showing baby on a very fundamental level like, hey, things in life happen that are unexpected, that can be scary, but I'm still here with you. Mommy is still here. I still love you. And
Right.
if baby's in an incubator, like that's not always possible, and we understand that. But there are like nuances to how we can engage. Just because you have a cesarean or a forceps delivery doesn't mean you're screwed. You have other options.
Exactly.
It's not black and white. This is birth the middle way for a reason. How do we find that middle path,
Right. Right.
And you did that with the
Right.
antibiotics and
And
talking about like, giving her like probiotics and supporting her microbiome now. And like you're doing that, you're finding that middle way where sometimes we need antibiotics. It's not, anyone's first choice, but like that's sometimes a life-saving need. And how do we interact with that
well,
afterwards?
unfortunately, it is a lot of people's first choice.
Right.
Unfortunately, yeah, antibiotics are being really overused, and we're perpetuating antibiotic resistance. And there's definitely a whole conversation to be had around antibiotics in and of themselves.
Hmm.
But yeah, no,
Hmm.
I think that you're making a really, really important point, right, in terms of that. And what actually you bring up for me that I want to reiterate again from last episode, there's very much so a continuation happening here, is the practice that I was presenting, which is to speak to the baby about what happened. And so in that moment, in that scenario that you just described, in terms like you were kind of speaking to it, but I would encourage parents in that moment to really go deeper. You were speaking like, sometimes things happen in life and they don't go our way, but like in that moment, in that golden hour, lights are dimmed, you're in the hospital room getting all of the beautiful things that you can elicit. What an absolutely excellent time to acknowledge that that wasn't the ideal for the baby. I'm sorry that that happened. I'm sorry that forceps were used. I imagine that that was uncomfortable and that was scary and that wasn't what mommy planned. That wasn't what you planned. And we're going to be okay. And that intervention helped bring you here and helped get you into mommy's arms. And I'm so grateful you're here. I'm so grateful you're in my arms. I'm so grateful that that intervention and that care exists and that we get to be together because of it. And just really acknowledging it from moment one, right? Just speaking it into existence, right? For you, for the baby, just acknowledge the truth of it. That wasn't ideal. And also it's okay. We're going to be okay, We're going to figure it out. We're going to go down the most beautiful healing journey and we're going to be so close and so attached and, just really, yeah, bringing it forward from the beginning. I think that that is just a really beautiful opportunity there. Yeah. And then to circle back to the question that you'd asked before around like what things you can do, the the main things that I would recommend would be, is there a way? The main thing I would personally be considering, and right, let's remember that I'm not a medical midwife, right? And so I'm not going to be orienting towards certain interventions or forms of care that I don't carry, obviously. So for me, what I would really be considering is how can I support this mother in connecting to her body, her baby, and her pushing. And so yeah, that like what I mean by that is, sometimes moms can be really tired, they can be really exhausted in this moment of birth, and they can start to get a little bit dissociated and just really want it to be over. It's the home stretch and they've ran a marathon most of the time. And so like pushing is a specific thing. Like there is connected pushing and there's disconnected pushing, and what the difference in that is the physiology of the mom actually really like grasping onto the baby and pushing the baby out, or is she feels like she's pushing but maybe it's like up here, right? Like, ugh. It makes me think of my 1-year-old. We're in the process of potty training her right now, and she does this thing where we sit her down on the potty and she like pushes but her arms are up here and she's trying to push, and there's no way it's dropping down into her bowels. Yeah. She's like up here, it's like in her arms, she's like flexing her bicep and calling
yeah. Good visualization,
and calling that
man.
pushing, and
she's embodying it.
To
yeah, be exactly the poop,
right?
Be the
right,
poop.
and so
you are the poop.
Right, exactly. Oh my god.
Yeah. That's what we're sharing on Instagram.
Smart. Should like that one.
Like, this is the podcast. Like, last episode, we're talking about board games for like 10 minutes. Yeah. Just like,
oh my god, we are in the raw and the real. We told you guys that from clip one. So if you're here with us, then yeah,
this is what you
welcome
get
to the reality of what we told you it was gonna be.
Yeah, exactly. Oh man.
Yeah, that's super funny. But yeah, so to finish that thought, so yeah, sometimes moms can actually need some layers of support to just get into a position where they are pushing in a productive way or a more productive way. And so that would be my first consideration, would be, I would ask the mom, right? Like, what are you feeling? I'd be in conversation with her. Like, do you feel the baby when you're pushing? What are you feeling? What are you experiencing? And then, after that, depending on, if the stuckness is related to something like shoulder dystocia, which is where the shoulder is stuck up behind the pelvis pubic bone and isn't passing into the vaginal canal. There's different little things like that. And then there are some physical maneuvers, which I'm studying, but I don't feel fully embodied in at this moment. Um, so that can be a more hands-on intervention, one that I am, I do actually seek to carry that wisdom, and that does feel aligned for me. And so that is, yeah, something that I'm in the process of activating. But that would be my next kind of layer, and beyond that I would do a transfer.
Right. So I am curious, um, because I remember when I was studying with the Free Birth Society and I did the Ultimate Guide to Free Birth course, and they were
Mm-hmm.
talking about various things like shoulder dystocia, hemorrhage, and all of this. And I'm curious to hear
Mm-hmm.
your perspective because something that they said, and I'm not quoting perfectly, but from what I can remember, they were saying that these definitions of shoulder dystocia and hemorrhage, and I'm sure other things as well, are not firm definitions, and that there's different variations of shoulder dystocia. There's different degrees of shoulder dystocia, and so sometimes baby's able to maneuver out of it with very little support. But in hospital settings, shoulder dystocia, um, even the most minor stuckness can be defined as shoulder dystocia, and so that will give way for a doctor to suggest forceps or a cesarean, instead of other things. Am I making sense?
Right. Yep. Yep.
Okay, so I'm curious to
Yeah, so
hear
you're
your
not wrong.
thoughts.
And
Okay.
no, I don't think that that's incorrect. What
Okay.
I would speak into is the spectrum of hospital care, right? Like across the Western world, if we're going to take in consideration into countries like Europe, Australia, these different places, there is a different spectrum of care. And again, there are hospitals that are more progressive and there are hospitals that are not, right? And so
Mhm.
I don't think that there's like we can really say that like all hospital or all systems are going to just right away jump in and be like, oh, a little bit of stuckness means we're automatically using forceps or we're automatically, suggesting a cesarean section. I would argue that that's not necessarily true and it's not a fair full picture to paint. And also,
Mhm.
yeah, they're not wrong in terms of there's variations of shoulder dystocia. Yes, that's why, like I'm speaking into when you asked what I would do, I would again start having conversations with the mom, step one, see
Mhm.
what she's experiencing. From there, creating some suggestions around movement. There's certain things that you can do. You can go on your hands and knees, put your knees together. That's going to completely change the shape of your pelvis. And that could be, again, that slight adjustment that just pops that shoulder through, right? Mom sitting on the toilet and actually just putting her hand on her yoni or even just putting a finger slightly inside to be able to feel the baby's head if the baby's already in the vaginal canal, right? That can be really helpful for a mom to actually feel her baby. And then the way in which she pushes can change dramatically from just that point of connection. So there's different things that can be done. And so know that teaching is not incorrect in terms of there being variation. And it's not incorrect that some hospitals will orient towards just a little bit of stuckness. Oh no, we need to, intervene versus offer slight variation and suggestions to explore if there is a more hands-off way. I feel, I guess, oftentimes the hospital isn't orienting towards, okay, what's the most hands-off way we can support this mom? That's not really, I don't feel as though that's the belief system or the orientation with which most OBs are holding space for birth, right? That doesn't mean that some aren't. And again, there's going to be a spectrum even within the system, right? And so I think that there's things to take into just consideration when we're making these definitive statements, right? And
Mhm.
the more that I study birth, the more I learn that there's actually not much room for definitive language in that way
Well,
because
and even
there's
like
nuance to
as
everything.
totally, and as you're talking about, what you might do or how you might approach a birth where maybe baby was feeling stuck or all these different things, and if you were to engage with the birthing process and the baby and bring about different options. Like I'm curious to hear if you know of any homeopathics that could be really supportive in birth and speaking to
Yes,
that a bit.
I meant
But
to speak
in
into that.
terms of
Thank you.
but in terms of the imprinting, like just kind of bringing this thread back a little bit, if baby is in the birth portal and is receiving this imprint of you're stuck, automatic cesarean, that to me is imprinting a black and white sort of way of thinking, as opposed to, well, let's try this position, let's do this, let's do this, let's do this, where that to me may instill a type of thinking where you're more option oriented, where you're looking at what do we have available here? What are my options? It doesn't have to be just this or just this. Maybe we could do this or kind of that or a little bit of this, and more of like an
Ugh,
open-minded way of
yes.
viewing things, right?
Oh my God, I love the thought. I love it. And I agree, and I agree, and it just makes sense, right? Like in terms of these
Mhm.
energetics and the subtleties, and even just from this idea that we're exploring that imprinting means that the subtleties of our experience imprint energetic patterns onto our
Right.
psyche and consciousness. Whew.
Mhm.
Love it. Yes, beautiful,
Ooh.
beautiful. Take it deeper and like contemplate it deeper, feel it deeper.
Mhm.
How deep does this idea of imprinting actually run? Right? Because we very much so are navigating the conversation from some very tangible and often spoken about variables in birth spaces. What you just spoke to there is an you took it to an even more subtle layer, right? Of that pattern, the energetic pattern of even working with an intervention. Like maybe in both of those scenarios, forceps end up being used. And there is a certain imprint from that. But how was the process of getting there? And what is the imprint of the process or the pattern, the energetic pattern that led to that decision making? Love it.
Yeah.
Absolutely love it. It gave me
Well, was
goosebumps.
there a discussion with baby
Yeah,
while that was happening? Like, hey, honey, we were going to do
right.
this, but we're going
This
in
is
for
gonna
a
happen.
cesarean.
Right.
Yeah, this is happening. I love you. I'm still here. We're getting an epidural. And just like what Fadwa was
Right.
talking about in a few episodes ago, she was saying when you get an
Mm-hmm.
epidural, you're getting cut off from baby, and baby's like, where did you go? And if that's the case, well,
Mm-hmm.
continue talking. It's not that baby can't hear you. Baby still hears the vibration of your voice and the rate of your heart. And so you
Right.
can still talk and say, "Hey honey, I know it feels like I'm not here, but I'm still here. I still love you. I'm with you. We're figuring
Right.
this out and we're
Right.
going to do a surgery to get you out because it seems like you're stuck, but we're here
Beautiful.
to support you." And again, just how do we engage with things? And this is what that term responsibility is. It's our ability to respond. And we always have the ability
Right.
to respond. And I'm not saying go back in time and change the way your birth unfolded, but we can still engage with these things now. Even if your children are 20 years old, 5 years old, 2 years old, we can
Right.
still actively
Right.
engage with that and discuss with our children what their birth story was. There's always an opportunity for healing and for
Exactly.
discussion and relation and connection, which is what humans desire, you know, it's connection. And when we're being
Which is what
born,
humans need.
exactly. And when we're
That's
being
a need.
born, it's that immediate, it's that first separation, right? It's that first, I'm coming into the world and I'm not just me and mom. It's not mother baby anymore. It's mom and baby. And baby psychology is still identifying with mom. But if there's that immediate separation without that connection afterwards, that creates an imprint. And if we can continue
Right.
even afterwards to be like, hey, we're still connected. I still love you. I'm still here, and just relate to that initial separation. Anyway, I'm curious. I wanna go on
Yeah,
into the
yeah, yeah.
homeopathic section because I'm like that. It's some
Right.
tangible stuff
Okay, I'll speak
to
into that.
for moms. Yeah.
Right, right. So let me first. There's two things that came up to me and when came up for me when you were just kind of going on that beautiful little rant. The
Mm,
first one again was is to reiterate to moms like that practice of acknowledging the truth of what is unfolding to the baby and acknowledging that they're experiencing it too, and how profound of an impact that can have for your baby. And so when you were speaking about, like, it feels like mom's gone, but I'm still here, and you were that's so beautiful, and I love that teaching. And to take it one step deeper would be to explain to the baby what happened. This is what's happening. Mommy received a medication. It's called epidural. And that is why you're feeling disconnected and we're not able to feel each other in the way that we were before. I know that that
Mm-hmm.
maybe feels scary. I know that, you might not know what's going on, but I am still here. And this is the reason that we're doing this. Things aren't going as we had planned. And so we're having this medicine in order to, maybe it's to let mommy rest. I need to have a sleep to get energy and strength to keep going. Maybe we are looking at, like a cesarean's looking like it's probably pretty likely. And so doctors are wanting to get that administered. Explain that. Speak to them as though, and it's actually, it's interesting, it's a reflection I've got from quite a few adults in just my mothering, is that I do speak to my daughters this way. They're 1 and 2 years old, and I sometimes use mother ease. Mother ease is defined as that tone of voice that's seen across every mother, the way in which she speaks to her baby. Hi, baby. Oh, it's mommy here. I love you so, so much. This is actually defined as mother ease. It's a specific thing. And so of course every mother uses that, and it's relevant, and there is a whole reason for it. It is physiological, it's biological, it's instinctive, it's intuitive, and it serves a purpose. And constantly talking to your babies, especially as they start to bridge into like 1, 2 years old, they're starting to use language, they're starting to understand concepts differently. I mean, I did this literally when my babies were newborns, like, to the point of, actually this bridges into my next point on this rant that you did, was wanting to speak into, you were speaking about severance and separation. And actually, mom and baby are not actually technically severed until the cord is cut. And so, the imprinting of the way in which true severance is initiated.
Mm-hmm.
And the severance of cutting a cord, or there's other things, there's a kind of middle ground, which would be a cord burning ceremony. And then you can go as far as lotus birth, which means that you don't actually ever cut or sever the cord, that you wait for the baby's body to release the umbilical cord at the belly button site. And the ancient teaching around lotus birth is that the baby not only receives all of the stem cells, oxygenated and mineralized blood, but the baby also receives all of the life force energy that is contained within the placenta. And then once
Right.
all of
And
that
there's
has
no
been
and there's no
received,
severance.
the baby lets go. There's
Yeah,
no
and there's
severance.
no
Well, I
severance.
mean, there
Yeah.
would be the moment of severance.
But
There's not severance in the form of cutting or burning, but severance would happen
it's an
at the moment
organic.
of the baby's
Yeah.
body releasing. Exactly.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
so
And
how
there's a
does that
way
different imprint kind of...
there's a way to
Yeah,
do
go ahead.
that also, just for listeners, like the placenta is an organ, and if you leave it just
Right.
on its own, it will decompose, and so there's a way to do that with herbs and salt and changing the salt, and there's a process to do
Right.
that so it doesn't become rancid, because that could
Right.
cause issues too. So just to offer that
Exactly.
little
Yeah, to
tip.
fluff that up a little bit more, a little
Just
more
yeah,
info.
exactly.
I recommend that if that idea is something that inspires you, to definitely do some reading and research around how to do it in a ceremonial and safe, clean way. So to bring that full circle in terms of the conversational aspect,
Hmm.
that was the first real adult conversation that I had with my daughters, was the moment of severing their placentas. And so I chose to do cord burning ceremonies in both of my births. I had actually planned to do a lotus birth with Sunny, my first, and she was born with a really, really short umbilical cord, which I'm pretty sure is likely connected to her being breech. I think that because of her short cord, she chose her ideal position. And so, like, short
Mm,
to quite an extreme, to the extreme of, like, even having, like, I could not put her to my breast until the placenta was birthed. The cord was too
okay.
short for her to be up on my chest and on my breast before the placenta was born. And another nuance that we can speak into when I go into my birth story, but I took hours to birth my placenta. And so she was on me. We were skin to skin. She was on my belly. She would like just like her head would reach like about here, like right at where my diaphragm sits. So this is high
Hmm.
up as she could get. And so we were, cuddling and all of that while we waited for the placenta to be born. But and then waited some time after that. After that, I was able to get her up on the breast, and the placenta was in a bowl next to me, and we waited another few hours before we were ready to do that ceremony of severance. And I spoke to her. I told her, like, Sunny, like, we're going to do a burning ceremony. We're going to remove you from your placenta, and we're going to give all of the gratitude and love to this placenta, to this beautiful organ that helped you grow inside of mommy's belly and gave you life. And we're here. You're in our arms now. Mommy and daddy are going to take care of you. Everything's going to be okay. You don't have to be afraid, and just really speaking to her and telling her what we were going to do before we do it. Because to think that even though she's a couple hours old, that she lacks awareness would be an absolute disservice to her. It would be an absolute disservice to her, And so, yeah, this is something that I share with everyone that I work with, and it's a point I really feel passionate about. And talk to your babies. Treat them as though they are aware and conscious, because they
And
are.
intelligent.
They're aware and conscious before they ever enter, and intelligent before they ever enter this world. Treat them as such. Treat them with reverence. Treat them with the respect of communicating with them, right?
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Well, even like as you're pregnant, I remember speaking to Floyd and telling him, this is what we're going to do for your birth. This is how we, and just speaking to him and letting him know, like, this is, what I've been learning. This is what we're going to do. And we were going to do a lotus birth. We had all these herbs. We had the bowl. We had, studied and done all these things. And we were going to do a lotus birth. And of course, that's not what ended up happening. But I would like to, not today, but I would love to also get into the wisdom and the science and spirituality of the placenta, because that is so amazing in and of itself, and in a lot of cultures, the placenta is referenced as the second mother, as the grandmother, the initial caretaker and caregiver of this baby that's growing. It's there's babies in the womb that are seen engaging with their umbilical cord and the placenta, like that is their initial life force. That is how they know us as mother, and they have an imprint of that, and it's just so I'd love to have an episode on like the placenta and
Absolutely.
cord cutting and delayed cord
Absolutely.
cutting and lotus birth, like just to talk more about that, because
Yeah.
that
Nuchal
I remember.
cord. Yeah.
Yeah, and like saving it, either, ingesting it or not, or burying your placenta. Like there's so many rituals and traditions and ways of engaging with the placenta, the cord, cutting the cord, or severing the cord in whatever way.
Right.
And even requesting, delayed cord clamping, or I've heard that, you can request a lotus birth in hospitals after a cesarean even. Like there are so many
Oh, wow.
options.
Interesting.
Yeah, so I mean, I'd love to
Wow.
have an episode on that. But before we
For
do that, I
sure.
want to hear
The
about these
homeopathics.
homeopathic, yeah, okay, so for pregnancy,
I
for
haven't forgotten.
labor, no, so pregnancy, labor, delivery and birth, and postpartum, for mom and baby. Like I'm
So I mean,
curious
that's
if there's
that's
different
a
ones,
huge
and
thing. That's a huge
yeah,
topic.
totally.
That might be a whole episode to go that deep. I think what
Fair
might
enough.
be more relevant is in like the where of, yeah, I mean, like there's a 36 remedy kit that's just a
Hmm.
birth kit from Helios. And so yeah, I mean, it's a really deep topic for sure. So I think to not speak
So
into all of those, like, and it's
fair.
also case specific, right? It's not like it's like, okay, this homeopathic remedy is good for all women in all pregnancies, right? So
No.
homeopathy very much so works on symptoms. So maybe I do a very quick, like, little brief explanation on homeopathy in general.
Yeah.
Um, so
Yeah. Well, and
homeopathy is an
if
ancient
you guys
medicine.
want, Oh, sorry. I
Okay.
was just gonna say, if you guys want more of like a full episode on homeopathics in birth, let us know, because that, I mean, I want that. That would be super interesting to me. Um, I do. I'm like, whatever. I guess if nobody watches it, I will. But yeah, sorry.
I'll do it for you,
Go ahead.
girl.
You can continue. Yeah.
uh, your desire is all I need. Um, yeah, so homeopathy was created in the 18th century. It's a very ancient form of medicine. What most people don't realize is that there was actually homeopathic hospitals all across Europe and all across the United States, which is a very interesting thing because, to my understanding, there's 0 homeopathic hospitals left in the United States today. Correct me if I'm wrong, please. I'd love to be wrong about that one. But yes, so homeopathy is from a belief system that's, or a teaching that is very different, if not the very opposite of allopathic medicine. And it is on the basis that like meets like treats like. And so basically what was discovered in the creation of homeopathy is that when we take a physical substance and we dilute it to the point of having nothing left of that original physical substance, and we do this dilution process with water, as we know, water has memory, right? Water will remember an imprint. And with that is what that memory that the water contains, that imprint that the water contains, it's a frequency, it's an energy, it's a vibration. And that vibration will treat what that physical object will elicit, the symptom profile that physical object will elicit in a healthy person is the very symptomology and imprint that the homeopathic will treat. So let me explain that a little bit further with an example. So in the realm of homeopathics, we use a very wide variety of physical substance to create the homeopathics, right? An example that often is really easy to use to describe this is heavy metals. So one of the remedies is called arsenicum, and it is made from a heavy metal that we all know called arsenic.
Arsenic.
And so what we know is that arsenic is poisonous, right? And there's going to be a symptom profile that arises, right? And so it's usually a flush of heat that rises from below, feeling really hot, really flushed. There's usually a panic. The person's psychology will get like anxious and panicky, and it's not even like, oh my god, I know I just like ingested arsenic and I'm gonna die, but actually it's a symptom that it elicits. The person will get really agitated, really scattered, really anxiety, really panic. And so we can use arsenicum, the homeopathic remedy, which has 0 of the physical component in it, to treat panic attacks, to treat anxiety, to treat overheating, to treat headache, to treat these different things, these different
And there's
symptoms.
also, so what I love about homeopathy is it functions on nuance. And so just because you're feeling panicky, there's another remedy that's called aconite
Exactly.
that is really helpful
Mm-hmm.
for, it's similar to arnica where after trauma and there's still like heightened fear states going on. But what homeopathy does is it's focusing on this entire picture of a person. And so there might be some overlap, and oftentimes there is. But this is where getting a very clear picture of what the individual is presenting and what the remedy offers and what the picture of the remedy is. It's
Exactly.
not this Western
Right.
ideology of this helps this, or you take this when you
Right.
hurt your foot, or you're feeling
For
sick,
all
so you
headaches
take
or for all
for all
anxiety.
headaches. Yeah, that's not what that is. And I
Right.
just want to read the
Exactly.
etymology of homeopathy. It's derived from the Greek word homeos, meaning similar, and pathos meaning suffering. And this is homeopathy is founded on this idea of like cures like. So the picture of the ailment that is arsenicum album or whatever it might be, the ailment that might present uh, helps to heal what is presenting in the body. And it's this idea that the symptomology founded in the body, what somebody is presenting, is guiding you exactly to a remedy that will help resolve that. If I'm
Right, exactly. And there's just subtle differences, right? And so like
Mhm.
aconite specifically in terms of like that treating the emotional anxiety or the panic, the specific with aconite is shock.
Mhm.
And so that's very specific, right? And so actually the two
Mhm.
remedies that I carry around in my purse all of the time are, as a mom, are arnica and aconite.
Arnica.
So
Yeah.
arnica is yeah, arnica. So arnica is going to be for anything physical, right? So anytime there's severe bruising, the skin has been cut or punctured. But, so if let's say my child falls, I'm going to use arnica and aconite if there was a
Mhm.
piercing of the skin or a physical injury along with an emotional shock and response.
Mhm.
If they fall and there's none of the physicality, there's no bruising, there's no puncturing of the skin, but there was a big emotional process, I'm going to give only aconite, right?
And
And so it's both
another,
shock.
well, I was just going to say another nuance of arnica. In my studies, for those of you that don't know, I'm a holistic practitioner and I've studied over 30 different healing modalities, and homeopathy was one of them. And arnica is so beautiful at healing physical ailments that if there's a broken bone, you need to wait until the bone is reset before you use it because it will help to knit
Exactly
that bone together so quickly. And
where it's
so
at,
it is
right?
very beneficial. Exactly. But that's where you could give, your child or somebody aconite in the beginning to help with that initial shock of, my God, I'm scared. My body is injured. And then once the bone is set, arnica, arnica, arnica. And there's different dilutions, which we don't have to get
Exactly.
into right now because, but there's,
Exactly.
5CH, 30CH,
Potencies, yeah,
there's
exactly.
different potencies that you would use for various situations. And so homeopathy is like, it's such an ancient medicine that goes so deep and like I'm stoked to have an episode solely on homeopathy and birth. That will be
Please,
That's
please,
like, I want props. I
please.
want like, I'm gonna be taking notes. We need like a
I've been wanting to order
blackboard.
props. That's funny that you say that. Teaching props, yeah. Well, look here. I aspire to one day be like my teacher Wapio and be very much so teaching about birth because I really love to just talk and teach and I love that role. But I see myself landing there in a few years. But I'll do my best. I'll share what I know humbly and also speak into what I don't know and be where I'm at as the evolution of this podcast goes through hopefully
Hmm.
many years. Let's see.
Yeah.
Yeah, so to circle back to specifically, we'll get there, people. Thanks for
We're getting
holding
there.
on with us. Specifically on the topic of a stalled labor and birth potentially related to malposition. The two remedies that are coming to my mind now, and like there's probably more, just to I'm very much so in the process of learning and studying specifically homeopathy in the realm of birth. But the two remedies that come to me would be first pulsatilla. And pulsatilla is going to be a remedy that if the baby is in a bad position, bad's a pretty strong word, is in an unideal position that's, preventing the continuation of birth. Pulsatilla is going to be a remedy that could really support the baby in changing positions. So one of the main quality of pulsatilla is changeability. And so this is also a great remedy to use in pregnancy if you know your baby is in a less than ideal position. So if you've had an ultrasound, you see your baby's in the position of breech or transverse or posterior. You can try this remedy, pulsatilla. Now the thing is pulsatilla is only going to work if the position is unideal. If the best thing for the baby to do is to change position, the remedy will help drive that process. If the baby's in the breech position, you take pulsatilla and the baby doesn't budge, the baby's telling you that's its most ideal position, right? And that that in and of itself might be a little bit of like a confronting piece for some people, because what if breech is the best position for some babies, right? Again, like me saying, I feel as though my daughter's placenta or my daughter's short cord influenced her position, right? And so, yeah, the baby will only move, it will only change if that's the best thing for it to do.
That's
Again,
interesting.
do you have anything you want to add or ask?
I took pulsatilla in my laboring process because I knew that.
Uh-huh.
And
And what was your intention? Okay, because you knew that, great.
yeah, and I was like, I want him to be in the optimal position, and he's, not coming. Like, let's, see if he's not in the position, because I didn't know what position he was, and I was like, he's not coming. Like, maybe he's, needs to move a little bit or whatever is going on. Or I didn't actually say he, because we thought he was a girl.
Right, didn't know that
Didn't know,
yet.
but I was like,
Right.
okay, baby, like, maybe you need to move down a little bit or turn around, whatever. And so I took pulsatilla, and he was in a posterior position, and he stayed in a posterior
And
position.
and so he didn't budge. Right. Right. And so that's the nuances, right? Is like we can't actually see into the womb to know where your placenta's at, what's going on with the cord, why the baby is choosing a specific position,
I mean,
etc.
energetically,
Right?
spiritually, like karmically too. Like there's also those layers that, did he need to be in a posterior position? Like, did he choose to pass away? Did he, like there's just, I mean, yes, there's nuance in the scientific
Unknown.
and the spiritual and the known and the unknown. That that's birth for you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, totally. Yeah, so the other remedy is caulifilum. This is made out of a herb called black cohosh.
Mm,
And this remedy is super cool when it comes to birth. Basically, this remedy does what the uterus needs. That's its profile
hmm.
in birth. And so it's very interesting as well. So again, so it can help, it could help with, changing position or moving things if that's what the uterus needs, if the uterus is weak. So if to speak of stalled labor, if there's a stall happening due to exhaustion, weakness in the uterus, something going on there, this would be an excellent remedy because it's going to give that burst of what the uterus needs. This is also a remedy that it can be explored for opening labor, or yeah, there's a lot of things that it can be used for. Okay, so I was talking with a mom. I had a mom use this remedy a couple months ago. She was not in the Sacred Valley. She's somebody that I was supporting long distance. Obviously was not going to be in her birth space, but was supporting her, and she was kind of having this weird experience going into labor in terms of things were starting to open and she'd experience things and then it would close, and it was kind of multiple days of this pattern happening. And um yeah, so she had reached out and just asked if there was any remedies that she could explore to help that. And this was one of the ones that I told her, because what I shared is that if what your body and baby are ready for is for labor to open, and that's the most relevant thing, then this remedy will support that happening. But it's not the same as forcing induction, right? It does what the uterus needs. And so if there's something happening that, like, some energetics could be supported, some strength given, something provided to the uterus, and that is what is needed in order for labor to fully open, then that will happen. If it's not the moment for labor to open, it won't happen. So you're not, with homeopathy, and that's the really beautiful thing that I love in the realm of pregnancy and birth, is like homeopathy is never going to force something to happen. It is going to support something to happen if that thing is relevant.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, that's just like, I don't know, I really love that. I
Yeah.
feel like it's, it really aligns with this, like, not disturbing element. It's, if I give a herb, an herb, there, that can force things,
Mm-hmm.
they're depending on the herb, and that can be relevant sometimes to, let's say a woman has had an incomplete miscarriage, and
Right.
she's not wanting to go the pharmaceutical route. There are certain herbs that can be given that, and there's risk involved with that. I'm not just saying, definitely, if you want to explore these paths, I recommend working with educated supports, but
Mhm.
there are options, right?
And this
And
is, I just want
coliphylum will
to,
also help with irregular. Oh,
no, no, continue. Go ahead.
coliphylum will also help with irregular contractions. And so if there's an irregularity happening in the actual laboring process, and that could even be like where I would feel really curious about exploring that remedy would be giving coliphylum to a woman after she's received Pitocin as an induction method in the system to support, because one thing that we know, there's a pattern after the presentation of Pitocin. Oftentimes the uterus is contracting with an irregularity. It can be more intense, these types of things. And so I actually would be really curious about that intersection, and to see if, coliphylum could be something that could help soothe those irregular contractions for a woman that's been given Pitocin. Because again, a homeopathic can't interfere with something with a medication. The opposite can happen. The medication can interfere and block the homeopathic and that energetic, but a homeopathic is never gonna, have a
Negative correlation. Yeah.
counterindication with
But
right, because there's no
homeopathics,
there's no actual physicality to it. It's an energetic
yeah.
medicine.
But homeopathics are super sensitive. So, drinking coffee, brushing your teeth with like toothpaste, essential oils, all of those will contraindicate a homeopathic and just null it. Like it just won't have the same effect. But I do want to just reiterate this really important piece of homeopathics is each remedy has a very specific, and this is a key factor of homeopathics, it's a very specific picture of what it's going to help. So, I mean, with various remedies, there can be like like you're feeling hot or cold, or hot in the morning or cold at night, or feeling emotional or weepy or frustrated or angry. Like there's a lot of subtleties and specifics. So again,
Mm-hmm.
when Sam, as an example, would be suggesting a remedy, she's gathering all this information. How are you feeling? When are you feeling that? What's going on? What do you have this? Do you have that? She's going to be asking specific questions to um, to get a clearer picture of what you're presenting. And I've got a few homeopathic books that really illustrate this. So I'm going to include those in the caption here, as well as in our homeopathic episode, whenever that's going to
I
be.
have a few I can add as
Yeah,
well.
perfect. Just to have some
Yeah,
reference
awesome.
material. So if this is something you're interested in, yes, you can ask Sam. You could ask, a homeopath in your local area, but
Community.
in your community. But having these books present is also really beneficial, because if you've got a few different remedies at home and something happens with you or your child or your partner, you're able to look and get a clear picture, even if you're not comfortable using homeopathics right away, looking at this whole picture of what's presenting, and just practicing, what remedy would I want to give? Would I want to give, Nux vomica, or, whatever remedies you're thinking of, because there are so many, and yeah, yeah. And just to again
Yeah,
tie that thread of like of imprinting, how beautiful would it be for our babies to receive that like gentle yet strong support in the beginning, before any massive force needs to happen? And how would that also reflect in our parenting after our child is born, where we show up with gentle but firm love, and hey, if I'm feeling angry, I'm going to communicate my anger to you and say, mommy's feeling angry or mommy's feeling frustrated right now, and I need some time to just go do this or go, and being able to show up with that tenderness and that love, but you're still being real and you're still being grounded within that, which to me is what homeopathic elicits. It elicits a strength and a groundedness, but a tenderness and a gentleness as well. A lack of like pushing and force and control, but still creating a really good container.
right.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah, I very much so feel like a baby on my path. Like with homeopathy, but I'm very inspired by it. Like it's just one of those things that's come in and been like a full yes for me in my path of
Hmm.
like, I need to study this more. I need to go deeper. Like, oh my God. It's
Yeah.
yeah, there's just it's I don't know, it's just something that resonates in my bones. I'm
Yeah.
sure, you know, we've all had those
Yeah.
experiences when we come up against something and it's just like,
Yeah.
I need to know more.
Yeah.
And I love those nuances that you're describing. And like, that's part of what inspires me is just these subtle details, you know? And one other teaching that's really beautiful in homeopathy is around constitutional homeopathy. And this is a whole different depth that
Mm.
you can go to, but it's, you know, exploring the remedy that matches your constitution. And so that can also be used in pregnancy and birth, and it's really beautiful because like a constitutional remedy, if you've found that for a woman, that can support her with things that are going on in pregnancy and in birth. And so you could actually, with a stall or something like this, if you know the woman's constitutional remedy, you can give that actually. And oftentimes that just supports her overall energy field
Hmm.
and can have really beautiful impact on anything she's experiencing. So it's a deep, deep realm that I am very, very excited to continue exploring and learning and speaking into and weaving into our episodes and conversations
Hmm.
and yeah, sharing about for
Yeah,
sure.
absolutely. And it's again, not to say that homeopathy is the only way, or if you don't use homeopathy, you know, because arnica is also really great after you give birth. You know, I took arnica for a long time, right? Like your body's bruised, it's gone through a journey, you know, and so it helps to bring everything back and just, you know, remedy that. But it's not to say that if you don't take arnica that your body's messed up. You know, that you can't go to a pelvic floor therapist or you
No,
can't do
exactly.
anything, or you know, like there's so many subtleties here and complexities here, and um yeah, and I want to just make sure that we're coming back to this main theme, right, of imprinting and how we can actively engage with this understanding that imprints happen. They're going to happen. And some of them we have control over, some of them we don't. But we get to be in relationship with them, and having a black and white view on any of them, I don't think is productive or helpful. Um, and this is where I kind of want to enter into this space of discussing an Instagram video that I saw the other day, or yesterday, that I saw yesterday.
Please.
And this is done by a woman. I don't know if I should. I mean, I guess I could share the name of it. I'm just going to pull up the video right now so I can speak to it with um, more accuracy. And this video was talking specifically about cesarean sections. And I'm just going to turn my volume down here so it doesn't make too much sound. But it is a video where it's depicting a woman giving Cambo, which is an ancient medicine, to another woman. And then there's text over top of this video. And it's the beginning text says, a cesarean section robs a woman of the full expression of birth. And I'm bringing this video up because I want to discuss this, um, because I don't fully disagree, but I absolutely do not 100% agree, if that made any sense. The second text that comes through is she doesn't get to finish the process. The baby is born, but she isn't. The video continues, and then it says vaginal birth is a death and a rebirth. A cesarean section leaves the death without the rebirth. That's why so many mothers feel lost. The mother's never born. Yeah, exactly. That's the death rebirth that she's speaking to. Then it says that's why so many mothers feel lost after their body remembers something was not completed. So in a process of a cesarean section, she's saying that the body understands that something isn't completed, and so there's something left open, something left that is, yeah, incomplete, not integrated. And until it's healed, she'll keep searching for the version of herself that never got to come through. And then that's the end of the video. And then she has some, you know, a long caption here, um, talking about how the birth is not completed if it is a cesarean section. And I saw it yesterday, and I looked at it, and I put my phone down, and I thought, that's enough screen time today, because it brought up a really strong emotional reaction. I was like, no, I don't need to do this right now, but I'm going to talk about this on the podcast. Um, because again, it's just talking about birth in such a fucking black and white way, and that causes problems, that causes issues. And it's speaking about birth as though the only way to have a healthy birth, the only way to enter mother is to have a vaginal birth. And if you have anything other than a free birth or an undisturbed home birth or whatever it is, that you're going to have trauma and it's going to be bad and you're going to fuck up your kid and you're going to fuck up you and you're not actually a mother and all of these things. And that is just so incorrect. It's gone way too far. And that massive semantic is so important because yes, vaginal birth, I will sit here likely forever and say that is ideal. Even if I'm never able to birth vaginally again, I will still sit here and say vaginal birth is the ideal. We are human beings. Our bodies biologically are designed to move through the birth canal. There are benefits to having the vaginal microbiome going in the nose and the ears and the mouth of the baby. Like there's benefit to having the compression of the skull and the shoulders moving and the whole way that the birth dance occurs and the hormones that cascade through mom and baby. There's a reason for this design. It's intentional. There's meaning behind it and benefit. Exactly. Yeah. Or that a cesarean yeah. Or that a cesarean section automatically means that's traumatic, that is not sacred, that is not like to have any blanket statement at all. I think I said in a few episodes ago, it's not what we do, it's the spirit in which we do it that makes something sacred. And you are still able to, you have a cesarean and you ask for skin to skin. Or you have a cesarean even like 3 years ago if you've had a cesarean and you want to integrate with your baby and work with this concept of imprinting continuously as a practice ongoing. This isn't a one and done, well, you had a cesarean and so you're fucked. Like that's not how that works. Do I do I swear a lot? You've got all the permission in the world, man. Fuck.
So with that, like, I think that I just really want to highlight a teaching for women who are out there who have either had cesarean sections for your birth and that was your truth, or that was your truth as a birthing woman and you had a cesarean section while giving birth to your child. And you can work with imprinting. I mean, there's a lot of things that you can do. I would really recommend, if you're the mother to a new baby who's been born via C-section, I really recommend taking that baby to a chiropractor. And I recommend doing some intentional things to work with the microbiome. You were speaking to those more physical kind of nuances. And with kind of the energetics, this kind of, I guess, bridges between energetics and um, physicality, but you can go through a practice of meditation of wanting of trying to put that muscle memory into the body. This exercise was shared with me, and I'm gonna be just really honest and transparent with this one. This exercise is the only thing that I walked away from that 3-hour conversation slash interrogation with this midwife that I mentioned. I think it was also in the last episode, who told me my baby was gonna die because she was too small because she couldn't find the position, etc., etc. So this is the one and only golden nugget that I walked away with that from that experience with. And other than the empowerment of actually like aligning, like the whole process I described in the last episode, was really empowering, and it was an activation that in the end was medicine for me, all part real like this. And
well, and I totally. And this is also where I want to bring up just the reason that I shared this Instagram video was because it was a really important piece that we are speaking to right now. It's not to shame her or say that she's a bad person or any of that. It's more so to bring up this conversation piece that we see in birth all the time, this black and white idea, that this is the best way, we have to do it this way. And yeah, and I think her intention was good. I think her reason for sharing this was to again speak to what you were saying, but I'm not here saying like she's a bad person, I'm judging her. It's more about
I think
yeah,
it's
just bringing
just like
awareness,
I think
having
there's
this
good
conversation.
intention. I
Yeah,
do think that
and
there's good intention,
recognizing
and it
totally.
does like how can we remove the skull
Yeah, but
vaginally, you know?
there is a nuance here as well of like when we share something on Instagram in a reel, we are only getting a little snippet of maybe a bigger truth. If we were to sit here and speak with this woman that shared this video, we would be able to understand the nuances, the totality of what she's thinking and feeling and what her intention is with sharing this. And this is where conversations like the ones that we're having in Birth the Middle Way, where we're talking for, almost 2 hours, sometimes more, and getting into the nitty gritty and then still not even feeling complete with the conversation. Like I'm not feeling complete at all with this concept of imprinting. We could talk about this for days on end and still not be complete with it, but we are getting to more of those nuances and those complexities that that is needed to have more of a whole picture of this concept. I think we had a technological glitch there. I just got a message saying that you stopped the recording, but I can see that we're still recording. Oh, and it's just me. So I guess I'll continue talking because we're here. So the intention here is to continue to have these conversations, right? And not to blame or shame anybody. And to recognize that when we're looking at something on our phones, when we're looking at a video that somebody posts and it triggers us, there may be nuances of truth woven within any given post. However, it is near impossible to share an entire truth. And so what this mother was speaking about, what this woman was getting into was weaving some pieces of truth. However, there were limitations because you can only have a caption that's so long. You can only share a video that is so long. You're only able to express and explore just barely the tip of the iceberg of a concept. And so really that's what Birth the Middle Way is. It's taking these ideas and exploring all of the nuances, because to say cesarean section is bad, that is not a true statement. To say that cesarean section is good, not a true statement. To say that cesarean sections can sometimes be necessary, that is more true. To say that cesarean section rates are really high and there are very likely unnecessary cesarean sections, that statement is more true. To say that vaginal birth that is undisturbed without excess outside medications, et cetera, is ideal, that is more true. To say that it is the only way, absolutely not true. And so this is where getting into those nuances and those subtleties and choosing to show up to these conversations if and when they trigger us, like even today, Sam was talking about, the even if you have a traumatic birth and then you're talking to your baby and saying, hey, but we're here together, at least we're here together and you're okay and we're okay. I felt this massive like drop in my whole body of sadness of like, I didn't get that. I don't have that with my son. And just this like wave of grief that came over me. But that's okay. It's okay to have those triggers there. It's okay to feel these things. It's gonna happen. We're gonna get triggered. And that was one of my big intentions with walking this path of grief, is like with all my friends, I'm like, trigger me. Honey, trigger me. You're gonna. The sun triggered me when the sun was shining down on me in those first months. I got pissed off. I was enraged at the sun because I was like, how dare you shine down your light on me? Do you not know what happened? You're not allowed to do that. The seasons started to change. You're not allowed to change seasons. How dare you change? Like, but the seasons aren't doing anything. The seasons aren't wrong. And I'm using that as an example to illustrate this point that just because we get triggered by something or we disagree with somebody doesn't mean that they're wrong. It means that we can show up and explore the nuances and engage with something that might be difficult. And that's why I brought up this Instagram reel that I saw, because it's like, that was a lot. I put my phone down. I'm like, no, I'm not doing any more screens today. But I want to bring this topic up and discuss birth and discuss this nuance and explore this, because it was kind of disheartening to see that, and I've seen other videos of women talking about, we had a free birth and it's the only way. This is natural. It's the way we've been, the way we were meant to. And this concept of like, if you don't have a natural birth, then you failed. But that's not accurate. That's not true. That can't be true. There's layers to this and nuances, and these black and white statements I don't think serve women or babies or families or humanity.
Social media, like you were speaking, it is oriented towards clickbait, and
Mm.
that clickbait triggering content can serve a purpose. It can get
Mhm.
people just at least engaged in the conversation, and that's one thing that I definitely see, the Free Birth Society doing in a way that kind of benefits them. Like, yeah, they trigger a lot of people, yeah, there's some things going on there that is a little bit shadowy, but they bear it all. They are like, and that's one thing actually, like specifically about Yolanda. She had a video like a couple weeks back where she was talking about, she was reviewing this video from Aubrey Marcus and his wife, and speaking into this whole kind of drama that was on our social medias a couple weeks ago for a minute there.
Mhm.
And just her semantics were so fierce. I was like, oh, sister, like,
Oh.
I don't know that I actually agree with everything that you're saying, but like, there's a part of me that can just be like, that's a specific personality, and like, I don't, like a very specific skill to feel secure enough in yourself to speak with that level of intensity.
Mm.
And don't get me wrong, I see myself as a person that can speak with intensity and can say some things, but like, yeah, she pushes my edges. So,
Mhm.
like there's also like a certain like wisdom, and I do believe, that oftentimes it's the very things that are our medicine and our gifts are oftentimes the very same thing that is our shadow, right? Or it can be like the parts of ourself that we need to work on and really, find balance around and integrate in really real ways. And so, with that, it's like there is a purpose to that in some areas, and it can just get people engaged in the conversation. And I think that that's not exactly what we're trying to do here, and I think it's also a bit unavoidable. I do think that we're trying to carry the intention to be really kind and mindful and inclusive within a certain scope. There is a conversation that I'm wanting to have on this podcast where I don't feel so inclusive, in all honesty, and we'll get there, and and I'm okay to be where I'm at and to bear that and be humble and vulnerable and in my truth, and maybe that will change at some point, maybe it won't, but we're also allowed to have strong beliefs as humans,
And
right?
then we're allowed to
And
change our minds too when we're
we're allowed to
confronted
change
with
our mind.
information that counters that.
Right, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And so yeah, just I guess even the nuance there as we
Mhm.
present that video, and it's like, I mean, it's always, nuance is always there,
Always
but
nuance. But this is also an invitation where if you're feeling triggered, and I yeah, I believe so firmly that conversation and intentional dialogue can heal the world. Like I really, really do. And that's one of the reasons why we are recording these conversations because we've been changed by our interactions and the way that we're engaging in these dialogues and how we come out of the conversations and reflect on them later and the threads that we follow within this dialogue. But I really do believe that conversations, especially when they're difficult, can heal. And so my invitation, I guess, to everyone that's listening is if we're triggering you, if there's something that you hear and you're like, I disagree with that, I would love for you to formulate and articulate a statement, a question, something, and bring that forward and say, hey, I don't fully agree. Or, hey, have you considered this or that? And if you are passionate enough to feel something and engage with it, to show up with a critical mind and choose to take part in this conversation because I want to hear what you have to say. I want to know your thoughts. I want to be confronted with information that changes my mind, that opens my mind, that inspires a new way of looking at something, that invites me to hold yet another nuance. Because I was that person that thought negatively and poorly and had a lot of mistrust with the medical system. I I and I don't blindly trust the medical system now. I don't. But I have a lot more breathing room for nuance than I ever did before. And so if you're feeling triggered, I am so curious to have you write out what that trigger is, what that's bringing up for you, and inviting that in and engaging with that, just like we would with any other kind of imprinting. Because sometimes our triggers are not just coming from our memories or traumas that we can recall at the top of our head. A lot of the time, you know, engaging with this topic of imprinting, our triggers can be rooted in what we received, what we didn't receive, in pregnancy, in the birthing process, immediately after birth. And yeah, and so I'm curious to engage with that, with you, with the listeners, and with Sam.
Yes, beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's a really expansive conversation and topic, and I think that it's one that we will absolutely bring this word, this concept of imprinting into many future conversations and into many
Mhm.
future episodes, as it's a really alive aspect. And I think that it's actually a beneficial consideration, right, in our lives. Like, actually, that consideration, that contemplation can be the very pathway to find clarity on our healing path, right? Of like, like I'm saying, doing these practices and these processes of writing out your birth story, right? Get clear. What were your imprints? What weren't your imprints? How did that affect you? Contemplating your early childhood. What was the messaging? Were you receiving love and support that was helping you helping you to develop a solid sense of self, a solid sense of safety in this world, a solid sense of
Mm.
trust? Or not, and like that really there's such a profound pathway there that can activate so much healing for every single person, like that it's relevant to every single person.
Yeah. And
And
the
it
first
can be
step
a
is
pathway
awareness.
right, exactly. And so like even that piece, right, because like as each parent and each mother is preparing for a birth, they're using their awareness to make that plan. They're using their past experiences and the information that's in their field, what they are aware of. And so a woman who's not aware that lotus birth is an option isn't going to be exploring that as an option, right? And so that's another thing. Like, yeah, that's a beautiful point. So yeah, imprinting, it's a beautiful, profound, relevant topic in the realm of everything human, so obviously birth. And so yeah, thank you all for joining us for this conversation and for this episode. And we
Mhm.
would love to hear what this inspired, what this brought up. Please engage with us, share your stories, join the conversation, and we look forward to reconnecting again soon.
Yeah, you're invited to come and have tea with us anytime.